In this lesson, we're going to be learning how to divide with a decimal in the dividend. The process from dividing with decimals in the dividend is pretty much the same as dividing any number. We're just going to have to figure out what to do with this decimal and our quotient. So we're going to start off by following steps, and the first thing we're going to do is set up the problem and solve it as if the decimal does not exist. So if I were looking at this, 61 and 2500ths, I would start by figuring out where my quotient is going to begin, and I'm going to see how many groups of 5 I can get out of 6, and I can get one group of 5 out of 6. 1 times 5 is 5, subtract, gives me 1. So I can bring down the next number. Now I'm looking at seeing how many groups of 5 I can get out of 11. I can get 2 groups of 5 out of 11, and 2 times 5 is 10, so when I subtract I get 1. Now I'm going to bring down the 2. So now I'm looking at how many groups of 5 I can get out of 12. I can get 2 groups of 5 out of 12. 2 times 5 is 10, and I subtract and I get 2. And now I can bring down the 5, my last one, and I'm seeing how many groups of 5 I can get out of 25, and I can get 5 groups of 5 out of 25. 5 times 5 is 25, and that gives me no remainder. Now the only difference here is I'm actually just going to, kind of like when I'm adding and subtracting decimals, I'm going to bring my decimal point straight up into my answer. So my answer would be 12 and 25 hundredths. Now the cool thing with division and multiplication, just like it has a fact family just like our normal fact family. So as you can see down here, I have the fact family for 5 times 3 equals 15, and I can go backwards down here and I can divide 15 divided by 3, and I'm going to get 5. Well, I can do the same thing in this problem here. If I take my quotient and I multiply it by my divisor, I should get my dividend. So I'm going to do that down here at the bottom and see if I get the same answer. That will tell me if my quotient is correct. And after I multiply, I do get the answer of 61 and 25 hundredths, which does match my dividend, so my answer should be correct. Let's try another problem. Here I'm looking at 823 and 8/10 divided by 6. So I'm going to start. Can I get any groups of 6 out of 8? Yes, I can get one group of 6 out of 8. And then I can continue. I can get 3 groups of 6 out of 22. It's going to give me 3 times 6 is 18. So I'm going to have 4. I'm going to bring down my 3. I can get 7 groups of 6 out of 43. 6 times 7 is 42. When I subtract, I'm going to get 1. When I bring down the 8, I now know I can get 3 groups of 6 out of 18. So I'm going to subtract, and I will get my answer of 0. And I'm going to put my decimal point up here in my answer. So my answer to this question would be 137 and 3/10. Now I'm going to check my work by multiplying 137 and 3/10 by 6. And I should get the answer of my dividend, which is 823 and 8/10. Pause this video and try one on your own. I also want you to use the multiplication to check your answer. Did you get the correct answer of 8 and 2/10? And did you check your work to find out? So you should have actually already known that you had the right answer because you checked your work. Now, the first couple problems we did were pretty simple because they didn't actually have what we would call a remainder, and sometimes we are going to have a remainder. However, when we are dividing with a decimal and the dividend, we can't end up with a remainder because this decimal actually represents a fraction, and so would our remainder, so we would have a fraction with another fraction, and we can't do that. So in order to do that, we're going to follow these steps. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to solve as we normally would. So I'm going to find that I cannot take any groups of 8 out of 4, so I know I'm not going to begin my answer there. But I can get 5 groups out of 8 out of 44, so I'm going to write 40, and I'm going to subtract, and I'm going to have a remainder of 4. But I can't. So because this is a decimal and my digits end here, I know that I can add zeros, as many as I need, after that decimal. So if I add a 0 here, and then I can just bring it down as if I just extended the problem. And now I can divide 40 divided by 8, and that's going to give me 5. I can get 5 groups, and then I'm going to subtract, and I have no remainder, and I can bring my decimal straight up into my answer, giving me an answer of 55 hundredths. Now I can multiply to see if that's correct. So I have multiplied here 55 hundredths, my quotient, by 8, my divisor, and I got 4 and 40 hundredths, or 4 and 4 tenths, which is my dividend. So my answer is correct. Let's try another one. Here I have 9 and 3/10 divided by 4. So I'm going to set it up as I normally would. And here I can see I can get at least 2 groups of 4 out of 9 because 2 times 4 is 8. And I subtract and I get 1. Then bring down my 3. And now I can get 13 divided by 4. So I can get at least 3 groups of 4 out of 13. 3 times 4 is 12, and I subtract, and I have what would be a remainder of 1. So here I'm going to simply put a 0 in my dividend in the next open spot, bring that down, and continue my problem. So now I'm looking at 10 divided by 4, and 4 goes into 10 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. Subtract, and I still have a remainder. So I can actually add another 0 here and bring that 0 down. And now I'm dividing 20 divided by 4, and that's going to give me 5. So 5 times 4 is 20, and now I have no remainder, but I still have to put the decimal in my answer. So my decimal would still go up straight from my dividend, and so the answer to this problem would be 2 and 325 thousandths. Now pause this video and try one on your own. Did you get the answer of 1 and 58 hundredths? You should have known you had the right answer if you were to check it, and even though it looks a little different from my original, because my original started with 7 and 9/10, but I know that 7 and 90 hundredths is the same or equivalent to 7 and 9/10. Sometimes you're going to come across a problem that you're going to ask yourself, what if I keep getting a remainder? You saw in previous problems that I added 1 or 2 zeros, but sometimes those, no matter how many zeros you add, you're never going to get to an answer. So we do have a solution to that. And our solution is that once you've reached past the thousandths place, you can stop and round to the hundredths, just for now, to make it easier, because we don't know if it would go on forever. So I'm going to set up this problem like I normally would. And I'm going to solve it the same way that I would normally. I'm going to see how many groups of 7 I can get out of 17. And I can get 2 groups. I'm going to subtract, bring down, and I'm putting my decimal here in my answer. And I can get 5 groups of 7 out of 36. 5 times 7 is 35. And I subtract and I get 1. Now, here's where typically I would extend my problem. I'm going to add a 0 and I'm going to bring it down, so it's going to give me 10. So I'm just going to continue to to solve. So 10 divided by 7, I can get one group of 7 out of 10. And then I'm going to subtract and I'm going to get 3. So I would have to continue, add another 0 and bring it down. That's going to give me 30. So now I'm looking to how many groups of 7 I can get out of 30. And I get 4. 4 times 7 is 28. So I can subtract. And I still have a remainder, so I'm going to add another 0 and I'm going to bring it down. And I'm going to have 20, and I can get 2 groups of 7 out of 20, which is going to give me 14. And I can continue and continue on forever. So here's where I'm going to make a decision to stop. And I'm going to round to the hundredths place. So I've taken it out to the thousandths and even further, and I can see that it's going to continue on. So if I'm rounding to the hundredths place, I'm going to look to the thousandths place to decide if I'm going to round up, and because it's a 4, I'm not going to round up. I'm going to leave it the same, and so then my answer is going to be 2 51/100ths. Now it's your turn. You try this one. I'm going to give you a hint. You're going to have to round it to the hundredths place. Pause the video while you solve this problem. Now, as you can see in this problem, you're going to notice a pattern. So here when I added a 0, I got 10, and I'm subtracting 9, which gives me 1. When I bring down the next 0, I get 10 again. So since I'm only changing this by adding zeros, this is never going to change. I'm going to end up with an endless list of 1s up here in my answer. So here again, I'm going to round this to the hundredths place, and I'm going to look to the right, and it's telling me that the number is going to stay the same. So I'm going to stop there, and my answer rounded to the nearest hundredth would be 1 71/100ths. However, I should point out that if you go to multiply this to check your answer, because you're not giving the actual exact answer, you're not going to get the same as your dividend. The next type of problem that we're going to address is, what if I'm asked to divide a whole number by a whole number with no remainder, but there's a remainder? So for example, we might normally think that we can't divide 7 by 4. What we should know about division is we can't switch these around. 7 divided by 4 is going to give us one answer, and 4 divided by 7 is going to give us a completely different answer. So in division, we cannot just switch it around. It does not have the commutative property. So what we're going to do is we have to set it up the way that we normally would. We're going to divide 7 by 4. Now, we know with what our knowledge and our past use of decimals, we can actually add a decimal here after the 7, and it's not going to change the value of the 7. So if I do that, so say I have 7 and I'm going to divide it by 4. I'm going to start here. I can get one group of 4 out of 7. I'm going to subtract, and it's going to give me 3. So I would have a remainder. But if I have that decimal, if I add that decimal, and I'm going to put it right here in my answer so I don't forget, I can add a 0 here, and then I can bring the 0 down, and I can divide 30 divided by 4. 4 goes into 30 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. And I still have that remainder here. So I can add another 0, bring it down, and now I'm going to be dividing 20 divided by 4. And I get 5, and subtract, and I have no remainder. So the answer to my problem would be 1 75/100ths. Now pause the video while you solve this problem on your own. Just a hint, the problem would be set up 8 divided by 5. Did you get your answer of 1 6/10? Well, if you checked your work by multiplying, you would know that you did. In this lesson, we have learned how to divide when there is a decimal in the dividend.